Most people won't watch this to the end, but you're not most people. A few nights ago, you probably did what you've done 100 times before. You lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet. Your phone screen glowed beside you. The world seemed asleep, yet your mind refused to rest. Bills, dreams, regrets, questions without answers. And somewhere between exhaustion and hope, a thought crossed your mind that you would never say out loud. When will it finally be my turn? Not for luck, not for a miracle, just for one real opportunity. One moment where everything begins to move. One person who notices what nobody else seems to see. You know that feeling, don't you? The feeling of carrying potential that nobody recognizes. The feeling of walking through life knowing you have more to offer than the opportunities you've been given. You work harder than people realize. You care more than people notice. You dream bigger than you admit. Yet somehow, the doors keep opening for everyone else. And after a while, something strange begins to happen. You stop expecting good things. You stop raising your hand. You stop believing that anyone important could ever notice you. Because disappointment has a way of teaching caution. And caution slowly becomes a cage. The heartbreaking part isn't that people underestimate you. It's that eventually you start underestimating yourself. Day after day, month after month, year after year, you begin shrinking your dreams so they hurt less when they don't happen. You tell yourself you're being realistic. But deep down, a small voice keeps whispering, "This can't be all there is." That voice never fully disappears. No matter how many setbacks you've experienced, no matter how many times you've been overlooked, no matter how many people walked away without seeing your value, something inside keeps refusing to die. And maybe that's why you're here right now. Because some part of you still believes. Not loudly, not confidently, but quietly. The strongest beliefs are often the quietest ones. Most people think opportunities change lives. They don't. People do. One conversation, one introduction, one unexpected connection, one person seeing something in you that others missed. History is filled with stories like that. An unknown artist discovered because someone noticed a sketch. A struggling entrepreneur given one chance. A writer whose work sat unread for years before the right eyes finally found it. Lives don't always change because someone becomes different. Sometimes lives change because someone finally gets seen. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Not failing, not struggling, not waiting. Being unseen. Because being unseen makes you question your own value. You start wondering if your gifts are real. You start wondering if your efforts matter. You start wondering whether all the dreams you've protected inside yourself are simply fantasies. You know that feeling too, don't you? Standing in a room full of people while somehow feeling invisible. Watching others receive recognition while you quietly continue carrying responsibilities nobody thanks you for. Smiling when you're supposed to smile. Nodding when you're supposed to nod. Pretending you're okay when you're secretly exhausted. There are people who have no idea how much you've survived. No idea how many battles you've fought privately. No idea how many times you've rebuilt yourself. And that's because strength rarely looks dramatic. Real strength often looks like getting out of bed when nobody would blame you for staying there. It looks like continuing when quitting would be easier. It looks like carrying hope after disappointment. That kind of strength rarely receives applause. Yet it's the kind that changes lives. The world celebrates visible success. But invisible perseverance is what creates it. Think about that for a moment. Every successful person was once unknown. Every respected leader was once ignored. Every admired creator was once doubted. Every wealthy individual was once a person staring at a future they couldn't yet see. The beginning never looks impressive. That's why most people miss it. They think success arrives with fireworks. Most of the time it arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. Like a knock at the door you weren't expecting. Like a phone call at the right moment. Like meeting someone who changes everything without realizing it. Life is strange that way. The moments that transform us rarely announce themselves beforehand. And perhaps that's fortunate. Because if we knew how close we were to breakthrough, we would spend our lives obsessing over timelines. Instead, we learn something deeper. We learn endurance. We learn patience. We learn who we are when nobody is watching. And that's where the story becomes interesting. Because there is something very unusual about people who have endured long periods of being overlooked. They develop qualities that cannot be taught. Humility, empathy, resilience, perspective. These are treasures hidden inside hardship. And the fascinating thing is that the most successful people in the world often recognize those qualities faster than anyone else. Why? Because they've experienced struggle too. Not everyone who becomes wealthy understands people, but many of those who built something meaningful remember exactly what it felt like to be ignored, exactly what it felt like to be underestimated, exactly what it felt like to hear no again and again. They recognize something familiar when they meet a person who refuses to quit. Something money cannot buy. Character. You see, talent is common. Potential is common. Dreams are common. Character is rare. And character reveals itself during seasons when nobody is rewarding you, when nobody is clapping, when nobody is paying attention, when the only reason to continue is because your heart refuses to stop believing. That is where true value is formed. Not in the spotlight, in the shadows, not during victory, during endurance, not when everything works, when almost nothing does. And maybe that describes your life more than you'd like to admit. Maybe you've spent years doing the right thing while receiving very little recognition. Maybe you've remained kind when bitterness would have been easier. Maybe you've kept showing up despite disappointment. Maybe you've carried responsibilities that nobody sees. Maybe you've built strength that nobody measures. You know what's interesting? The qualities that often go unnoticed by crowds are exactly the qualities noticed by people who genuinely understand success. Because real success is not built on talent alone. It's built on trust. And trust comes from character. A billionaire can hire talent. A company can buy skills. An organization can train knowledge. But integrity, perseverance, heart, those things are much harder to find. And that's where a surprising question begins to emerge. What if the very experiences that made you feel forgotten are the same experiences preparing you to be discovered? What if your years of feeling unseen have been shaping something rare? What if the qualities you developed during struggle are exactly what someone important has been searching for? Not because you're perfect, not because you're famous, not because you're lucky, because you're becoming the kind of person who can handle what comes next. And that changes everything. Because suddenly the waiting means something different. The setbacks mean something different. The delays mean something different. What if you are not behind? What if you're being prepared? What if the reason you've survived everything you've survived is because your story isn't finished where you thought it would end? Most people never ask that question. And that's why they miss what comes next. Because the next chapter isn't about luck. It's about recognition. It's about the moment someone sees what was there all along. And there is something about that possibility that deserves a closer look. Because what happens when a person who has spent years being overlooked finally meets someone who recognizes their value? That's where everything begins to change. Most people misunderstand how life-changing opportunities actually appear. They imagine that success arrives because someone is the smartest person in the room, the most talented, the most connected, the most confident. Yet reality tells a different story. Some of the most extraordinary opportunities in the world began because someone recognized a quality that couldn't be measured on paper, a quality hidden beneath ordinary circumstances. And that's where this story becomes uncomfortable. Because if someone extraordinary walked into your life tomorrow, would you even recognize the opportunity? Or would your years of disappointment convince you to dismiss it? You see, when people spend enough time being overlooked, they develop a strange habit. They stop expecting good things. Not consciously, quietly, gradually. The human mind adapts to repeated experiences. When doors remain closed long enough, we stop knocking. When opportunities fail to appear, we stop looking. When enough people underestimate us, we start agreeing with them. That is the danger. Not failure. Not rejection. Agreement. The moment you begin believing the limitations placed on you. The moment you accept a smaller future simply because it feels safer. The moment you stop imagining that your life could become larger than your current circumstances. That is where dreams begin disappearing. Not because they weren't possible, because they were abandoned. Have you ever noticed how children assume amazing things can happen to them? They don't question possibility. They expect it. Somewhere along the journey, many adults lose that expectation. Pain teaches caution. Heartbreak teaches hesitation. Disappointment teaches doubt. Until eventually, possibility starts feeling unrealistic. Yet what if that feeling itself is misleading? What if your current circumstances are giving you incomplete information? Think about it. A seed buried underground looks exactly the same whether it is dead or preparing to grow. From the outside, there is no difference. Weeks can pass. Nothing visible happens. The surface remains unchanged. But beneath the soil, everything is happening. Roots are forming. Foundations are strengthening. Preparation is taking place. The visible world sees nothing. The invisible world sees transformation. Many lives follow that same pattern. Long periods where nothing appears to change. Long stretches where effort seems unrewarded. Long seasons where progress feels invisible. And then suddenly, growth appears. The world calls it luck. The world calls it overnight success. The world calls it perfect timing. What they don't see are the years beneath the surface. The preparation nobody applauded. The lessons nobody noticed. The resilience nobody celebrated. You know what makes this difficult? The waiting. Because waiting tests parts of us that achievement never can. Anyone can feel motivated when results arrive. The real challenge comes when they don't. When another month passes. When another year passes. When another opportunity disappears. When another dream feels further away than before. This is where most people stop. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. They continue existing. But they stop expecting. And expectation is powerful. Because expectation changes how we see the world. Two people can stand in the same room and experience completely different realities. One notices obstacles. The other notices openings. One sees limitations. The other sees possibilities. Neither is necessarily wrong, but their focus determines their future. And perhaps that's why some opportunities appear invisible to certain people. Not because they aren't there. Because disappointment trained their eyes to overlook them. There's another truth most people never hear. The individuals who create extraordinary success often spend years searching for the right people. Not the most impressive people. The right people. People they can trust. People with character. People who stay committed when circumstances become difficult. People who don't crumble under pressure. Those qualities are surprisingly rare. Far rarer than intelligence. Far rarer than talent. Far rarer than ambition. Because character costs something. It requires experience. It requires endurance. It requires surviving seasons that nobody volunteers for. And that's why your struggles may have given you more value than you realize. Not because suffering is enjoyable. Not because hardship is magical. Because certain strengths can only emerge through challenge. Patience, wisdom, perspective, compassion, resilience. These qualities are expensive. Life charges a price for them. And many people are unwilling to pay it. You already have, whether you wanted to or not. That matters more than you think. Because eventually there comes a moment when preparation meets recognition. A moment when someone notices what others ignored. A moment when years of invisible growth become visible. But before that happens, something else must happen first. You must stop measuring yourself through the eyes of people who never understood your value. That sounds simple. It isn't. Many people spend decades trying to earn approval from those incapable of giving it. Parents who never saw them. Friends who underestimated them. Employers who overlooked them. Partners who failed to appreciate them. The search for validation becomes exhausting. And the saddest part? Even if they finally receive that validation, it rarely heals what they expected it to heal. Because external recognition can never fully replace internal certainty. You cannot borrow confidence forever. Eventually you must build it. Quietly. Patiently. One decision at a time. One promise kept to yourself at a time. One small act of courage at a time. This next part matters more than it might seem. What if the person you've been waiting for isn't simply looking for talent? What if they're looking for evidence? Evidence that you remained faithful to your growth when nobody was watching. Evidence that you continued learning despite setbacks. Evidence that disappointment didn't make you bitter. Evidence that hardship didn't destroy your character. Because those are the qualities that cannot be purchased. And those are often the exact qualities powerful people search for. Not because they're sentimental. Because they understand something most people don't. Character predicts outcomes better than appearances. A polished image can fool people temporarily. True character reveals itself eventually. And always. The world eventually discovers who people really are. Which means every difficult season you've survived has been writing a story about who you are becoming. Not who you were. Who you are becoming. And that story matters. More than credentials. More than popularity. More than first impressions. Because when the right opportunity finally arrives, it won't simply be looking at what you've achieved. It will be looking at who you've become. And that's where the deepest question emerges. What if your greatest qualification is something no resume could ever capture? What if the thing that makes you valuable isn't visible yet? What if someone, somewhere, is searching for exactly the qualities you've spent years developing without realizing it. Because if that's true, then your waiting has a purpose, and the next chapter may be much closer than it appears. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when the question changes. At first, we ask, why is this happening to me? Later, if we stay open long enough, the question becomes something else. What is this preparing me for? That shift changes everything. Not because your circumstances suddenly improve, not because every problem disappears, because your relationship with the struggle transforms. And when that happens, the struggle loses its power to define you. For years, you may have viewed certain disappointments as evidence that life was working against you. The opportunity that disappeared, the relationship that ended, the door that remained closed, the dream that seemed delayed beyond reason. You looked at those moments and saw loss. And that's understandable. Pain always looks like loss when you're standing inside it. But time has a strange way of revealing things that emotions cannot. Years later, people often look back and realize that some of their greatest blessings arrived disguised as detours. The job they didn't get led them somewhere better. The relationship that ended protected them from future heartbreak. The setback they hated developed strengths they desperately needed later. Life often makes sense backward before it makes sense forward. You know that feeling, don't you? Looking back on something you once begged for and realizing it would have limited the person you were meant to become. It's humbling, almost mysterious, because it reveals how little we sometimes understand about our own journey while we're living it. There is a deeper truth hidden here, a truth most people overlook. Growth rarely arrives through addition. More often, it arrives through transformation. And transformation is uncomfortable. A caterpillar doesn't simply become a butterfly by learning new skills. It becomes something entirely different. The old form cannot carry the new future. Something must change. Something must expand. Something must be released. Human beings experience their own version of that process. Not physically, internally. The person you were 5 years ago could not handle certain responsibilities you can handle today. The version of you from years ago may not have possessed the patience, wisdom, or perspective you now carry. Those qualities weren't downloaded overnight. They were developed. And development takes time. Sometimes far more time than we'd prefer. This is where many people become discouraged. They see preparation as delay. They see growth as waiting. They see invisible progress as no progress. Yet some of the most important changes happen where nobody can see them. Think about the strongest buildings in the world. Most people admire the visible structure. Very few think about the foundation. Yet the foundation determines everything. Height, strength, stability, longevity. Without a deep foundation, greater success becomes dangerous rather than beneficial. The same is true in life. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually foundation work. Not punishment. Preparation. Not rejection. Construction. Not abandonment. Formation. The perspective changes when you see it that way, because suddenly the years you've spent developing resilience no longer feel wasted. The seasons of uncertainty no longer seem meaningless. The moments that tested your faith no longer appear random. Instead, they become part of a larger process. A process shaping you into someone capable of carrying greater responsibility, greater influence, greater opportunity, greater impact. Stay with this for a moment. What if the life you're hoping for requires a version of you that is still being formed? What if receiving everything you wanted too early would have harmed you rather than helped you? Many people pray for larger opportunities. Few people pray for the wisdom required to handle them. Many people desire success. Few desire the growth necessary to sustain it. Yet the second is always more important than the first. Because opportunity without preparation creates pressure. Opportunity with preparation creates expansion. That distinction matters more than most people realize. The strongest individuals aren't necessarily the ones who moved fastest. They're often the ones who allowed themselves to be shaped by the journey, who learned from setbacks, who remained teachable, who refused to become cynical, who kept their hearts open even after disappointment. That last one is rare, very rare, because pain naturally encourages self-protection. After enough disappointment, many people build walls around themselves, walls around their expectations, walls around their hopes, walls around their trust. The walls feel safe, and for a while they are. But eventually those same walls begin blocking the very opportunities they were meant to protect. The challenge becomes learning how to remain wise without becoming closed, strong without becoming hard, careful without becoming fearful. That balance changes lives. Because opportunities often arrive through connection, through relationships, through unexpected conversations, through people. And if your heart remains open, you'll notice possibilities others miss. You'll recognize moments others ignore. You'll hear invitations others dismiss. You'll see doors others walk past. Not because you're luckier, because you're available. Availability is powerful. The world is filled with talented people who are emotionally unavailable to possibility. People so focused on past disappointments that they cannot recognize new opportunities. People so convinced nothing good will happen that they accidentally overlook good things when they arrive. You don't want that to become your story, and it doesn't have to, because every day presents a choice: to remain defined by what happened, or to become available to what could happen. The difference seems small, but over time it creates entirely different futures. What comes next is quieter, but it's the part that stays. Your value has never been determined by how quickly others recognized it. A diamond remains valuable underground. Gold remains valuable before discovery. A masterpiece remains beautiful before anyone sees it. Their worth does not depend on recognition. Recognition simply reveals what was already true. The same is true for you. Your value existed before anyone applauded, before anyone noticed, before anyone believed, before anyone invested, before anyone opened a door. The recognition you seek cannot create your worth. It can only reveal it. And once that realization settles deeply enough, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing validation. You start carrying certainty. You stop begging to be seen. You start becoming visible. You stop doubting every step. You start walking differently. Because now you're no longer waiting for the world to tell you who you are. You know. And when that certainty arrives, opportunities begin feeling different. Not because they've changed, because you have. The first question we opened was whether your years of being overlooked meant something. Now we can answer it. Yes. They helped build qualities that could not have developed any other way. They helped shape strength beneath the surface. They helped create depth, resilience, wisdom, and perspective. The waiting was not empty. The preparation was real. And now another question remains. What happens when someone finally recognizes what all those years were creating? That's where the story turns. And that's where everything begins to move. And then, one ordinary day, something happens. Not the kind of thing movies prepare you for. Not fireworks. Not instant success. Not a dramatic announcement that changes everything overnight. Something quieter. Something easier to miss. A message. A conversation. An introduction. A simple moment that initially appears insignificant. That's how many life-changing opportunities begin. Because transformation rarely arrives looking important. It usually arrives dressed as something ordinary. A few years ago, a young man spent nearly a decade trying to build a business. Nothing seemed to work. Investors ignored him. Friends questioned him. Even family members began suggesting he find a different path. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't untalented. He simply wasn't being noticed. One afternoon, exhausted and frustrated, he attended a small gathering he almost skipped. There were no celebrities, no major executives, nothing that appeared extraordinary. Most people would have called it a waste of time. But during that event, he spoke with one person. Just one. The conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That's all. That person introduced him to someone else. That introduction opened a door. That door opened another. And within a few years, everything changed. When people heard the story later, they focused on the success. Very few focused on the decade of preparation that allowed him to recognize the opportunity when it appeared. Because that's the hidden part. Opportunities don't simply arrive. They arrive and then ask a question. Are you ready? And readiness isn't measured by excitement. It's measured by preparation, by character, by perspective, by what you've become during the waiting. You know what most people miss? The opportunity wasn't the conversation. The opportunity was the person he had become before the conversation happened. Had that meeting occurred 10 years earlier, he would not have been ready. He would not have possessed the wisdom, the maturity, the clarity, the resilience. The timing mattered because preparation mattered. That changes how we see our own lives. Because suddenly, the delays stop looking pointless. The struggles stop looking random. The waiting stops feeling empty. Everything becomes part of the preparation. And maybe that's where you are right now. closer than you realize. Not because I know your future. Not because anyone can predict exactly what happens next. Because life has patterns. And one of those patterns is this. Long periods of invisible growth are often followed by unexpected recognition. Not always from where you expect. Not always when you expect. But often sooner than you think. Stay with this for a moment. What if the conversation that changes your life has not happened yet because the version of you who needs to have that conversation is still emerging? What if the opportunity isn't late? What if it's waiting for alignment? What if all the qualities you've been developing are preparing you for a moment that would otherwise pass you by? Those questions matter because they replace frustration with curiosity. And curiosity keeps hope alive. A person with hope walks differently, listens differently, sees differently, responds differently. Hope changes posture, not just emotionally. Practically, it creates awareness. And awareness notices opportunities. The people who seem lucky often have something else. Attention. They notice what others overlook. They respond where others hesitate. They move where others freeze. Not because they're fearless, because they're available. Available to possibility. Available to growth. Available to connection. This next part matters more than it might seem. Somewhere in the future, there may be a person whose life becomes better because you didn't quit. A business that succeeds because you stayed committed. A family that flourishes because you remained strong. A community impacted because you continued growing. You cannot see those outcomes yet. Neither can anyone else. But unseen outcomes shape human history every day. Most meaningful influence begins invisibly, quietly, slowly. Then suddenly people call it success. What they rarely recognize is the years of unseen preparation behind it. And that's why your story isn't small. Even if it feels small right now. Even if nobody is talking about it. Even if recognition seems distant. The chapters nobody applauds are often the chapters that matter most. Because they're building the person who will eventually walk into the opportunity. And when that opportunity arrives, something beautiful happens. You don't have to pretend to be ready. You are ready. Not perfect. Ready. Not fearless. Ready. Not finished. Ready. That's the difference. If this is finding you at the right moment, comment still here below, like this video, and subscribe. There's more coming for you. Because being still here is no small thing. You survived seasons that could have broken you. You carried burdens nobody understood. You kept moving through uncertainty. You continued showing up. And that matters. More than you know. The second question we opened earlier was whether someone could truly recognize qualities that others overlooked. Now we can answer it. Absolutely. Because the right people are not looking for perfection. They are looking for substance. Not appearance. Depth. Not hype. Character. Not performance. Authenticity. And authenticity cannot be manufactured overnight. It is earned through experience, developed through challenge, strengthened through endurance. That means your struggles may have created something more valuable than immediate success ever could. They may have created you, the version of you capable of carrying greater opportunities when they arrive. The version of you capable of leading with wisdom rather than ego. The version of you capable of handling responsibility without losing yourself. And that realization changes everything. Because now the story is no longer about being discovered. It's about understanding why you were worth discovering all along. And that brings us to the most important realization of all. The realization that ties everything together. The realization that most people spend years trying to find. And once you see it, you'll never look at your life the same way again. Do you remember the image from the beginning? The quiet room. The glowing phone screen. The questions that refused to leave your mind. The feeling that life was moving for everyone except you. The uncertainty, the waiting, the wondering. Everything we've talked about leads back to that moment. Because the real question was never whether opportunity exists. The real question was whether you could see yourself clearly enough to receive it when it arrived. For so long, you may have believed your greatest challenge was finding the right opportunity, finding the right person, finding the right break, finding the right door. But what if the deeper challenge was something else? What if it was learning to recognize your own value before someone else confirmed it? That changes the entire story. Because people who know their value move differently through life. Not arrogantly, not loudly, not with entitlement, with quiet certainty. And quiet certainty is powerful. It doesn't need attention. It doesn't demand approval. It doesn't chase validation. It simply knows. You have probably met people like this. People who walk into a room carrying a calm confidence that cannot be explained by money, status, or popularity. They are not trying to impress anyone, yet others naturally notice them. Why? Because certainty is attractive. Not certainty that says, I'm better than everyone. Certainty that says, I know who I am. There is a profound difference. And perhaps that is what your journey has been teaching all along. Not how to become valuable, how to recognize that value already exists. Think about everything you've survived. The disappointments, the delays, the setbacks, the seasons when nothing made sense, the moments when you questioned yourself, the nights when you wondered if your efforts mattered, the years when you felt invisible. You made it through all of that. You are still here. That fact alone tells a story. Not everyone would have continued. Not everyone would have remained kind. Not everyone would have kept trying. Not everyone would have carried hope through uncertainty. Yet somehow you did. And maybe you've become so accustomed to your own strength that you've stopped noticing it. That happens. Human beings adapt to themselves. The qualities that make us remarkable often feel ordinary because we live with them every day. Your resilience feels normal to you. Your perseverance feels normal to you. Your compassion feels normal to you. Your ability to keep moving feels normal to you. But viewed from the outside, those qualities are extraordinary, especially in a world where many people quit at the first sign of difficulty. Stay with this for a moment. There are people who possess more resources than you and less strength, more connections than you and less wisdom, more recognition than you and less character. Because life does not distribute its gifts equally. Everyone carries different treasures. The tragedy is that many people spend their lives focusing on what they lack instead of recognizing what they possess. And when that happens, they overlook their greatest assets. You don't want to make that mistake, because some of the qualities you've developed are priceless. Not expensive, priceless. They cannot be purchased, cannot be borrowed, cannot be inherited. They had to be earned. And you earned them. One difficult day at a time. One challenge at a time. One setback at a time. One decision to continue at a time. Now something remarkable begins to emerge. The years that once appeared to be stealing from you may actually have been investing in you. The waiting that felt empty may have been building capacity. The struggles that felt unfair may have been creating depth. The delays that frustrated you may have been protecting timing. Viewed from that perspective, your story changes. Not because the facts change, because the meaning changes. And meaning shapes everything. This next part matters more than it might seem. Most people spend their lives trying to become someone important. Very few realize they were becoming someone impactful. Importance seeks attention. Impact creates change. Importance is noticed. Impact is felt. Importance depends on visibility. Impact depends on substance. And substance is exactly what your journey has been creating. That's why the right opportunity doesn't simply look for talent. It looks for substance. The right partnership doesn't simply look for appearance. It looks for depth. The right mentor doesn't simply look for potential. They look for evidence of character. The right connection doesn't simply ask, what can this person do? It asks, who has this person become? That question changes lives. Because it means your hidden years matter. Your unseen growth matters. Your quiet victories matter. Your private battles matter. Everything that helped shape you matters. And now we arrive at the realization. The realization that connects every part of this journey. The realization that explains why the waiting was not wasted. Why the growth was necessary. Why the struggle carried meaning. Why the future remains full of possibility. Here it is. The opportunity you've been waiting for is not searching for a perfect person. It is searching for the person your journey has been creating. Read that again in your heart. The opportunity you've been waiting for is not searching for perfection. It is searching for preparation. Not flawless performance. Authentic growth. Not someone who has never struggled. Someone who learned from struggle. That changes everything. Because suddenly you stop seeing your past as a collection of mistakes and setbacks. You begin seeing it as training. Preparation. Formation. Evidence. Proof. Proof that you can handle more than you once believed. Proof that you can survive difficult seasons. Proof that you can continue despite uncertainty. Proof that your story contains far more strength than you've given yourself credit for. And once that understanding settles inside you, fear begins losing its grip. Not all at once. Gradually. Quietly. You stop asking whether you're enough. You start asking where your gifts can serve. You stop obsessing over who notices you. You start becoming the person you were meant to be. You stop chasing every opportunity. You become ready for the right one. That's a different way of living. A lighter way. A stronger way. A wiser way. Because now your future no longer depends entirely on circumstances. It depends on the person you've become. And that person is far stronger than you realize. Far more prepared than you think. Far closer than they appear to the next chapter. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But closer. Closer than yesterday. Closer than last year. Closer than when this journey began. And perhaps tonight, before you fall asleep, you'll return to that quiet room once more. The same walls. The same ceiling. The same silence. Yet something inside you will feel different. Not because all your questions have been answered. Not because every uncertainty has disappeared. Because you'll understand something you didn't fully understand before. Your life is not defined by how long you've waited. It is defined by who you've become while waiting. And somehow, without forcing it, something in you already knew.